Hello and welcome to Batflips and Nerds, the baseball podcast with a British twist. I am Darius Austin and we are back with more hot WBC content. And who better to bring us that content than our man in Houston, live in the stadium, is Russell Eassom. Russell, how is it going?
It's going good. It is the field day today. I can maybe briefly turn this around and you can see that Team Canada have arrived and are having their warm-ups. They're going to take the field for the next 90 minutes. So probably while we're having this conversation, you might hear some hits, although you'll probably just hear the blaring music that still goes in the stadium, even when no one is actually here to listen to it apart from the players.
Yeah, I sort of hadn't really thought about that, but it is quite incredible that they're still blaring the sound system when there's nobody there.
Yeah, I guess the teams get to choose their music, and the only way for them to hear it is it's over the whole entire sound system.
Incredible. Well, we could probably have an extended rant about how sports venues are too loud these days, but we won't do that because there's lots of baseball to talk about. And the group stages are over. They've concluded. We have a quarterfinal lineup. But I think before we talk about all the other groups, I guess we should start with Pool B, and we should start with Team GB, who have again successfully qualified for the next WBC. So, Russ, I imagine you've spent an awful lot of time with the team over the last few days, and I think it was a great performance against Brazil. I think maybe people were, following along, almost surprised to feel relatively relaxed during that game because it was mostly under control. That's what it felt like to me, anyway.
Yeah, I think we'll go in reverse and we'll start with that game. I think that what GB had shown well at vast periods of the entire tournament and in that game is that they pitched well. They had a few moments in all of the games, and even like the moment a game in Brazil, they did give up that first run, and you were like, okay, GB has to score, which is a little bit of we know it's been struggle for a bit of the tournament, but Justin Wiley hitting that home run not Justin Wiley, Ian Lewis Jr. hitting the home run to tie it straight back up to 1 and then getting ahead. Once that had happened, I think after watching Brazil play their games against Mexico, playing their games against Italy, they hadn't really looked that strong offensively, but they picked up 5 runs against the US, including Lucas Ramirez going deep twice, but they really kind of like struggled offensively for most of those games, and GB kind of stepped it up from then. And as that game just progressed, it did get more and more to the point where you're like, yeah, you know what, like GB are better than Brazil, and that result did show out to do that. And yeah, the qualification for the next tournament is massive. Repeatability is a huge thing with funding and with sport in the UK. So getting that actually the chance to happen again is a great thing. There's next things that they'll move on to, which we'll probably talk about at other points with the Premier Sort of qualifying at the end of the year. But it was a great result in the end, and I think it was the first time they probably really put an entire performance together. The games against Mexico, Italy, and the USA, they were strong at times. They were capable of holding in with those teams, but each time they let it get away from them. Like they conceded like more than 1 run in basically every inning that they actually conceded runs in those first 3 games. So they really struggled to put out the fires once it started to go slightly wrong, which will be a learning point, I think, for how they come at this again in the tournament's times afterwards. But seeing how Italy performed against USA and Mexico afterwards, losing that game 7-4 is not as bad as it, like, I think looking at it respectively, it's actually a much fairer like reflection of where like GB are.
Yeah, I was wondering about that actually, and being around the guys, what sense was there of missed opportunity in some of those games? Did they come off the field thinking, hey, we could have actually won those, and we just, things didn't quite break our way at the right moments? If we'd had a lucky hit or here or there earlier in the game, it could have been very different. Did they really feel like they could have come away from this tournament with more than 1 win?
Yeah, I think so. I think Brad spoke in the press conferences in most of the games saying that like we didn't execute 100% like in all of those games. So GB knows that they aren't the same caliber of team. The USA team is an all-star team. The Mexico team has MLB talent throughout that whole entire like lineup and has MLB talent on the pitching. Italy has a mostly MLB level team or a lot of quad A players. GB doesn't quite have that same depth, but they just didn't quite take some of the moments they had. They left men on the bases in both the Mexico and Italy games that could have really kind of pushed the momentum back into kind of like their favor. The decision, I think, to pull Naya Victor in the USA game and bring in Scrub, I think that's one that Brad has said that kind of like maybe given the chance to 2020 hindsight to go back, he might have like let him kind of like continue on and see what it was going, but he wanted to switch from like a left to right pitcher to a north to south pitcher to kind of to go with that. And but like it didn't work. GB were gonna have to play at like 99 percentile and hope that those other teams were playing somewhere in their bottom quarter percentile. And I think in all of those games they ended up playing in 70, 80 percentile sort of territory. It wasn't quite there. And if we're honest, like Jazz wasn't quite there. Like he was added to this lineup hoping to be like the person that could add power, add stolen bases, be a talisman, but he didn't really have a great tournament. Going 0 for 4 in the game against USA, I think with the golden sombrero was was not what Team GB needed in those games. But yeah, I think you can't underestimate the impact that he had on the rest of the squad and the team being pulled together. But when it came to the games, he didn't have like he got the RBI and a couple of singles in the end to kind of to help GB get through Brazil, but he didn't get that Vinny moment that Pasquantino got yesterday, where after going over 12 while Italy were winning 3, hitting 3 home runs to be the first person ever to do that in the WBC game.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Italy. Maybe the biggest shock of the group stage is that Italy have topped Pool B after beating the USA 8-6 and coming back out the next night. And as you say, Vinny hitting 3 home runs to help them beat Mexico, and fortunately let the US still advance through to the quarterfinals. So, how did you were you surprised by that, having watched them play their first 2 games, or did you think that there was that potential for an upset? Because there is, as you say, still a lot of major league talent on this roster.
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting way that like how teams can build up. Like Italy's schedule was Brazil, GB, USA, Mexico. So if they kind of had the chance to build themselves into the tournament, get 2 wins against potentially the favorable uh, matchups, and then really go for it in against USA and Mexico. It allowed them to kind of they lined up their best pitchers in Lorenzen and Nola in those 2 games. And to be honest, USA and Mexico made Lorenzen and Aaron Nola look like Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens, like even though they were going pitching in different games. Yeah, it's still a shock. It's still a shock that Italy kind of like won those games, because if the Cespedes Barbecue Boys said it in a tweet, which I think perfectly kind of sums it up, it's like the junior team beating the varsity team, like because all those Italian Americans could have been on that team. Roman Anthony chose to be on the USA team instead of potentially being on the Italy team. So yeah, it's definitely a shock, but I think Italy and probably Mexico to a certain extent are not playing within the same limitations that the US has. Like this is something that I think people need to remember, that although this is a great international tournament and it is becoming a bigger and bigger thing, all of these players are on restrictions from their teams. And so these top players are probably on the worst restrictions out of everybody. I think people can complain about Darius' handling of the games, but he was pretty much hamstrung to be like, these people can pitch on these days and they can do this much. And he had to basically bring people in at certain times and not bring other people in at certain times to do that. It was the way of having those players available meant that he didn't have the ability to just pick and choose as he wanted. It was a lot more like, here are my like jigsaw pieces and I have to kind of like fit them together instead of be able to kind of like throw who he ever wanted. And so, yeah, I think if you had lined it up correctly, I don't think you would have put Tarek Skubal against GB. You would probably should have pitched Tarek Skubal against Italy. That's what cost them kind of like winning that game. But they're still into the knockouts. They have a game against Canada now, which everybody on the USA team will be thinking is a game that they should be winning. And given how the system is set up, they have a potential path to the final where they'll play Japan more than likely. But who knows? Obviously, they'll have to play either South Korea or Dominican Republic first before hitting it out on that other side.
And what was the atmosphere like in that Italy US game in terms of the balance inside the stadium? Was there a lot of shock amongst the crowd? Did you get a sense of that from where you were?
Yeah, the atmosphere was pretty amazing for a lot of these games. The USA Italy match was weird because obviously like Italy got ahead and then tacked them on and tacked more and more on. But when PCA hit the 3-home run, this crowd was electric. I think people still thought that they were gonna. This was like the start of like the comeback, and it was building up, and it was building up, and it was building up, and having like Judge up to bat in the ninth, being like the tying run, I think a lot of people here were expecting that like, okay, here's a Judge WBC moment. He's gonna take a yard and like either take this game to extras or kind of like help USA win it in this innings, and it didn't happen. He got struck out by, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Greg Weiser.
It was Greg Weiser, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, you know what? Like relievers in Major League Baseball, like they're all good in a very short period of time. So they all have a pitch or something that is a little bit unusual. That's why they're Major League like relievers. And short sample, it can go their way. And it did, but no, like the USA Mexico game was utterly phenomenal when it comes to atmosphere wise. Just it was probably, I want to say like 60-40 Mexico to USA fans, but they were both very loud. Like you honestly like couldn't tell who was like the home or the away team. It was like there were moments when the USA fans were massive. There were moments when the fans for Mexico were loud. And yeah, the only difference I'll say is that like the Mexico fans are like constantly loud, and the USA fans were loud in the moments like when like USA did something or when it was the time for when something happened for Team USA. But no, but Houston has hosted some pretty epic games. Even like the GB versus USA game had great atmosphere. There was times when on the big screens it would like show a British fan and there were like massive boos, and then it would show like an American fan and there were massive cheers. Like it really worked well, and the stadium's had the roof on for the whole entire time I've been here. It's actually open right now, which is the first time I've seen the stadium open because it's been a pretty wet actually a week or so out here in Houston. So they've had the roof closed to make sure that we don't get any rain delays. So keeping that sound in, it does feel pretty electric.
Yeah, I can imagine. I guess we should talk about Pool A because that is where these teams are going. So Italy have earned themselves a game against Puerto Rico in the quarterfinals, and as you said, USA were playing Canada, who won that pool. So pretty impressive performance from the Canadian team all around, I think, and certainly did well to come out of that. I think when we were talking about it before the tournament, we said this is a group that several teams could stake a claim to. Canada, the ones who done it. So how impressed have you been with what they've done?
Yeah, I think you do have to say that Canada winning that group was a shock going into the tournament. It's not anything that we expected. Maybe seeing the Puerto Rican team and lineup that they eventually managed to put together due to various insurance, injury, and cannabis reasons means that like it isn't as a standout of as a Puerto Rico lineup as it could be. Obviously, still has Edwin Diaz closing when they need to, but you kind of need to score the runs um, to kind of go against that. They only conceded 7 runs in all of their games that they pitched Puerto Rico. So, but they only scored 15 across the 4. So that's going to be what they're going to struggle with, like in the games that they come up against. So their game against Italy will be amazing. But no, Canada, they ended up with a 3-1 record with losing to Panama, who the team that finished bottom of the group. So this tells you like everything you need to know, I think, about this group. These groups ended up slightly lopsided, but it's very hard to do that properly, like an international sport at all, even not just with like baseball, because you do things predicting on like performances 3 or so years ago and how you kind of pull things together. But yeah, no, this Canadian team, a lot of them played in the WBC back in 2023, and I think that experience shone through in some of those games. And then obviously getting performances out of Paxton like they did, like in those final games, to actually kind of get them through, get them over the line. He got pulled on 49 pitches, so they're still theoretically like available to pitch like in the rest of the tournament. That shows some savvy knowledge of the tournament, which maybe some other managers and systems have not shown so far. To quickly highlight that, I'm not certain if Darius ever actually thought that they were qualified. It was probably like a misspeak of how he kind of like talked about it, but it is kind of hilarious that like the talking point for 24 hours was, do the US know the rules of how the tournament works?
Yeah, that did seem to be the bulk of the content on social media, and that was just Mark DeRosa doesn't know the rules of the WBC. Yeah, I think you're probably right. It's one of those things you just say, and he meant to say we've practically qualified, not I think that we're actually already in. But yeah, still drew plenty of attention, and of course could have gone very bad for them on that final game against Mexico.
Yeah, to be in that scenario was not good. But yeah, I think going back to Pool A, Puerto Rico had to come back in extras to beat Panama as well. So this group actually ended up being a fairly like even group across the board. If you look at it from a selfish like Team GB perspective, like if they were replaced Colombia, who would have been not even Colombia, would have been Panama, probably the team that they would have replaced in that group. Honestly, there's probably a chance they could have got out of that group, but there's also a chance that they could have finished bottom because there wasn't a clear bad team. And obviously you'd probably want to be in that group because that gives you the opportunity to go further. But yeah, I think Panama will feel a rub to have to go back through the qualification process after beating the team that topped the group eventually.
Yeah, it's definitely could have gone a lot of different ways, that one, I think. I guess we should talk about Japan and probably talk about Andre Satoria and Chechu as well. The expected result in the end, but they didn't quite dominate all of the games throughout, did they?
Yeah, like Japan won out. I think the game against South Korea was a really entertaining game. They absolutely mashed Chinese Taipei, which is something that I don't think people really anticipated would happen. But with Otani hitting that grand slam like in the second inning, I think at the end of the second inning being a triple away from a cycle. But in the games against South Korea, in the games against Australia, in the games against Czechia for 8 innings, Japan didn't look as imperious as they did in qualifying last time around. So I think teams have got to think that yes, they are still one of the favourites, if not the favourite to win the tournament, but they are human, as to say that there are some chinks in the armour there, and we'll have to see kind of how they perform. Now, they did score a lot. They did only concede 9 runs across 4 games, so they scored a lot in obviously beating in a couple of the games and tacked on those late runs, which made it look better than it did. But when you have like Otani, when you have Murakami, when you have Yoshida playing like it's 3 years ago again in the WBC, seems to be that he just needs to think that every game that he plays in Boston is a world-based is wearing a Japanese jersey, and he might be a much better player than than when he is. But no, Japan progressed. Czechia, it was a tough group for Czechia to get anything out of. If we're honest, like Chinese Taipei, Taiwan were unlucky to be relegated last time around. They were in the group where all 5 teams finished with 2 wins, and they had conceded the most runs, so they had to go re-qualify, which meant that they were the qualifying team in this group, and they're not a qualifying team. They're nowhere near the level of the other qualifying teams that come through. So Czechia definitely had a rough time going about that, but Australia was the game which they really need to get something out of, and I think the pitching from Australia was a really like a pleasant surprise for what they managed to get out of it. They limited Japan to 4 runs, and they limited South Korea to kind of even like to 7, and in the games that kind of got away with them. And obviously the 3-0 win at the start of the tournaments against Taiwan to kind of really kick it all off. So there's 5 teams there that will feel that they've done good. I think Taiwan will be upset after winning the Premier 12 to not make it out of that group, but it was always going to be a very difficult task with um with South Korea and Japan in it.
Yeah, and I think Australia too. I'm sure if you'd said this to them at the start of the tournament, they would have taken it. But given the circumstances and how close they came, they're probably feeling a little bit disappointed to not make it through either, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. You win 2 games, you kind of push it the way they threw. I think that game against Japan, where kind of it's 3-4 in the end, but it's like obviously they got 2 back in the top of the ninth to kind of, and you felt that, oh, are we about to see something here? Like there is a real like momentum shift kind of like happening in this game, and you were like, they just couldn't quite kind of get over the line. But people like Bizarna have showed that why they are like the number one in the world to kind of to get it out there. And uh, yeah, number one top prospects in the world, but also like the McDonald pitching has just been absolutely like phenomenal as well. And I think from a purely selfish position, we probably would have wanted Australia to get through. That's purely thinking about 2032 and the fact that Brisbane is hosting the Olympic Games, and we want a strong Australian baseball team to make Australia keep baseball in the Olympics, because it is now an invitational sport and not a core sport. But who knows? Hopefully they did enough to maybe keep that in thought.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And finally, Pool D, which may be the sort of the most predictable winner with the most predictable results in their games. The Dominican Republic lineup did Dominican Republic lineup things, didn't they? They mashed against everybody.
Yeah, 41 runs scored in 4 games. They demolished. They put 10 on, or they put 10 on Israel, Netherlands, and Nicaragua, and then put 7 on Venezuela in that last game in what honestly looked like an atmosphere that was amazing. And thinking of the games that I saw with Venezuela and USA in Miami last year, it's definitely want to make sure that those guys potentially stay there to the semifinals, so I can see games like that again. But no, this one, I mean, out of all the groups, this is the one that went to the letter of what you kind of anticipated. Nicaragua were the qualifier, did struggle. Netherlands, obviously that's a tough loss against Israel in the end. I think obviously losing potentially one of their probably most key players in the minutes before the tournament starts due to being suspended for drugs, and seemingly also not telling anybody anything, and just that profile seemingly just left. Doesn't probably like help build up like the atmosphere that is like involved. But like the Netherlands team is a good one, is a strong one, but I think no, like they have some opportunity to pull players from abroad the same way that from Curacao and a few other places in the Caribbean, but not the same way that like GB can, and not have the same thing that the same thing that Italy and potentially Israel can have by pulling in a lot of players of ancestry to pull that off. But that game at the end between Israel and Netherlands was an entertaining one to kind of like to watch, even if it wasn't potentially like there wasn't any consequences like behind it. But when you look through like the lineup, you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like still like a fairly good team. And again, you go purely from a selfish perspective, drop GB in this group, where would they finish? Yeah, I think they would have had very good games against the, like they would have been replacing probably Israel based on last year's performance. So yeah, they could have had a chance of finishing 3rd or 4th in this group. I think that would have been the same, but I don't think they would have touched Venezuela or the Dominican Republic in how they were playing. So this one played out fairly kind of as we anticipated, but has some pretty glorious highlight moments from some of the walk-offs, and especially kind of how some of those games went, that like the Netherlands nearly lost to Nicaragua before, and all of those other games that kind of like were close but required some um why is the bats to come live at the end?
Yeah, it was heartbreaking to see the Nicaraguan players looked devastated after Ozzy Albies hit that home run. They were so close, and I did feel quite bad for them watching them after that game because that would have been an amazing moment for them.
Yeah, they're not up there for me to quite have the Schadenfreude moment, but like there seem to be a few clips of the fans like getting ready to record the win and then having the home run take the game away from them and stunning them into silence. Like I don't dislike Nicaraguans enough for that to find that like highly amusing, but it's still slightly amusing that you're there ready to kind of film what potentially is the greatest moment in your team's history and just to have it kind of like wiped away from you.
Yeah, pretty devastating for them. So we obviously have that quarterfinal lineup set. The Dominican will go through and play Korea, and Venezuela will of course be playing Japan. Have you got your eye on a game here? Which are you looking forward to the most out of the four?
Yeah, I think probably like Puerto Rico, Italy. Again, is another one of those ones where we've seen Italy win, we've seen them kind of go through again to kind of push this through. Now we've got to guys to see like, okay, it's just can you do it again? Is it repeatable? Like because this is tournament baseball where it's single elimination. Like Italy have everything's probably gone their way so far. Like will it continue to do that? That's definitely one. Um, it's probably wrong to say all of them because they all have some really interesting things to talk about them. But South Korea, Dominican Republic, that's some big swingers on both sides. Like the Korean approach to swinging a baseball bat is all or nothing, and the guys on that Dominican lineup is the same. So I can't imagine that they'll be not entertaining games. USA Canada, hey, like every game the USA should be favorites basically, and unless they play probably like Dominica or Japan. So you've got to think that they should be winning this, but it's like, can they get their head out of the funk that maybe that they're in? How does it all play? Canada, the neighbors to the north, is there any extra bite that can go into that? I'm looking down here and I can see that freaking Josh Naylor is wearing like a Canadian hockey jersey as he's like taking his BP. See if I can turn around and show that to people. If you can just see down there, just waiting to like take his BPs in a Canadian hockey jersey. But yeah, like they're enjoying it. They've had like a great tournament to kind of to get to this point. But you without knowing kind of like the exacts of like who's going to pitch, who's going to go for that. I think USA Logan Webb is pitching for them in the quarterfinal game. So these all should be great entertainment to watch. The only slight thing that I don't like is that the quarterfinals are manufactured. So the fact that the USA and Japan end up on the different side of uh, the brackets, no matter what. So it's a little bit. I love the WC and all the different things, but and people have a go at it for being an exhibition or stuff like that. And I'm like, well, it isn't. We can juggle players, it definitely isn't. But when the organizational stuff happens like that, you can be a bit like, this isn't really like the way it should work. Italy and USA should have their game, should be playing in the different games. Italy should have earned by beating the USA, not the fact to have to play Japan in the semi-final.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit off that one. I think certainly anybody used to any standard knockout tournaments, it's anathema really to have that concept come up. So you would like to see that not happen. Yeah, I understand why they've done it, but yeah, it feels like Italy should be rewarded more than they have been for winning that group.
Yeah, I initially read it that they were just switching the games so that USA would be played at like on a certain time we'll get like a certain game because that happens in other competitions where it's just like, oh yeah, like they'll play this semi-final or this quarterfinal regardless because we want them to basically have the prime TV slot. But that's not the case. But hey ho, like if Italy have got to win this tournament, they've probably got to beat Japan anyway. So do it in the semifinals instead of the finals and have some potential grudge match, revenge match against for the US, like in the final. Or who knows, we could have a whole Latin American, Dominican Republic, Venezuela final again, go for another ding dong down in Miami. Any one of those games will be great to watch. And yeah, can't wait to get to them.
Yeah, we've got Suarez Yamamoto on Saturday night, which should be pretty banging matchup. So
Yeah, and I think I'm not saying with like Japan's games last time round, can't remember who they had in the quarterfinals, but the game against Mexico in the semis, like that atmosphere was amazing, and I imagine the Venezuelan atmosphere in Home Depot again will be the Lone Depot Park will also be like another pretty ecstatic one to be involved with. I'm a little disappointed that the quarterfinals, some quarterfinals are here and not all of them back over in Miami, so I'm going to miss out on watching a couple of them compared to last time round, but can't really complain.
seems to be going all right. I wanted to ask more generally. You were obviously at the last one. It feels like the last one hyped people up even more for this. Does it feel different on the ground? Are there more people around? Is there more press interest, or does it feel kind of like last time?
Yeah, I think kind of like from a personal perspective, like me and Gav last time around, were pretty fly on the wall with our approach. We kind of chatted to some of like the GB players and the GB staff as kind of like things went on, but we kind of sat in our little press box area and kind of just cheered GB and kind of asked questions in press conferences and kind of did that around. This time around, with a phone and a couple of mics, I've been far more just like, feck it, let's just kind of go. This person looks semi-free. Let's go ask them some questions and see what their thoughts on it. And so yeah, it's very interesting to do that. The players seem to be like everybody's involved in this is loving like what's going on. A lot of them seem to be talking about like how like the clubhouse feels different to like the regular season. Mark DeRosa even himself was saying that like in the past when he was playing, players would just chill in the clubhouse or chill in the hotel lobby after the game because that's all they could do. And like players don't normally do that because they can go home and play on their Xbox or stream or go to go do so many things that like were just not available in the past. So they don't interact in the same way they did before. So it was very interesting to hear to say that like their players are almost like actually interacting like a team like they used to and how that's actually kind of having a positive impact. But no, yeah, Houston, it's been wet and muggy for most of the time. So compared to Phoenix, which was just hot and dry heat. But no, it's an amazing experience to be out here. I can't really say many bad words around it because it's just unbelievable to be able to get to watch these games, get to see and have the conversations with not just the players, get to comment on how small Jeff Passan and Ken Rosenthal and John Morosi all are. If you wanted to know, Bob Nightingale is actually quite tall. He's definitely like the the
I
tallest.
have seen Bob in person, yeah, and he is quite a tall man, yeah.
You combine the other ones together, it's a different experience. But no, it's just nice. You just kind of get to meet and say hello to some of the people. Obviously, I've done a couple of interviews with Vinny, and I've chatted to him a couple of other points during this week, and he is just genuinely like a wonderful person. Like seems so friendly, so willing to chat, seems to be having the time of his life. But this has genuinely been a passion project for him. He was in the press conference after the game yesterday is like, I'm struggling not to like cry here. It's like, this is a big moment. This is a lot of effort that have been put in not by himself, but by many of the other people involved. And so seeing that sort of stuff and then seeing the other side of him where before the game, before the USA game, he was basically Bobby Witt was coming out of the interview room and he was coming into the interview room and he was like, "Oh, are we allowed to shake hands? Are we allowed to hug?" Making discussions of everybody getting upset about Carl Raleigh and Randy Rosarena having just a thing between friends, which everybody assumed was way worse than it actually was.
Yeah, Vinny, I mean, every piece of Vinny content I think I consume makes it seem like he's one of the people who, especially in a short tournament like this, if you're trying to get a bit of clubhouse chemistry going, I think the value of that cannot be overstated. He must be a tremendous guy to have in there to bring a team together.
Yeah, like if you want to talk about like a player that you have like, when people say like, oh, they have intangibles or whatever, or is a clubhouse glue or whatever. Like, Vinny 100% has that. Like everybody who's involved in this Italian team is bought in. It's even Francisco Savelli was like, oh, it's Vinny's team. Like he's done a lot of the effort, but he's the one who's basically just allowed people to be people. Yeah, Savelli said that like a lot of the time when young players come in, they can be quite. They have to. How do we have to behave behind like how the veterans are or whatever? And Vinny's not like a massive veteran like himself or anything like that, but he's set the tone basically of like, no boys, we be ourselves, and you be you, and that's kind of basically what helps basically these players come through because for this first few games it was the bottom of the lineup for Italy that was hitting, like Vinny until that game that was over 12 before hitting his 3 home runs. But against USA, I think they went over 22. The top 5 in the order did. So it's like those young guys are really stepping up and kind of having those great moments in it. And it's just fantastic to see people have fun playing baseball because it's clear that everybody who is here playing is genuinely having fun.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to see. I think another great part of this tournament, and we don't really get, I think they've faded away the curmudgeons who, complain about bat flips and people having fun on the field. We don't get so much of it in MLB anymore, but you really, really get the sense in this tournament that nobody would even think about saying that the fans, the players, they're all having too much fun for somebody to come out and say this isn't how you play the game.
Yeah, well, speaking of bat flips, Jack Caglione did say in the post game for his one is that he meant to let go a lot earlier, but the pine tar got stuck on the glove, and so basically, like by the time it basically actually came out of his hand, he'd launched it a lot further.
I thought he was going to hit somebody in the dugout with it.
Yeah, he was just like after he left it, he was saying it was like, oh bollocks, I've nearly like hit somebody. But it's just amazing to see these moments. It's amazing to see like constantly with the WBC being an opportunity for young players to come up and get to show themselves on a stage that they maybe wouldn't normally get to see. So obviously with Lucas Ramirez for Brazil and with Caminero as well, getting the breaking Aaron Judge's bat and getting him to ground out into the double play, like Nigel Victor probably just added like a load to his reputation from striking out 3 major league players, including getting Gunnar Henderson to strike out swinging for that last out. He did say that he was trying to cheer and celebrate towards the fans, but maybe directed it a little bit too much at the dugout because some of the US players were just like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna get you, boy. We're gonna get you."
Yeah, wonderful to see so many great stories made, and yeah, so many profiles raised as well as part of this. Gav did ask us about the Olympics. There are implications in this tournament beyond just who wins the tournament. So I don't know if you can speak to that briefly about the implications for who advances and who doesn't here, and how that might affect what we see at the Olympics in 28.
Yeah, it's the weird thing with baseball with the Olympics is because it's a team sport and it's they don't want many teams actually in it. Team sports take up too much space in the Olympic Village. So there's only 6 teams that actually will be in the Olympics. And so that means that one of them is already guaranteed because it's USA, the host nation. The WBC and like the Olympic Committee decided how we're going to fill out the rest of the 5 spots. The America's part of the allocation decided that they were just going to do it based on the 2 teams that do best in the World Baseball Classic. So whichever 2 teams that are classed in the Americas, which is basically just any North, Central, or South American or Caribbean team that will finish in the top 2 below the US, will qualify for the Olympics. No other country has chosen to use this. Most of the rest of the qualification will come via the 2027 Premier 12. So the top Asian team, which will form in that 2012, and the top Europe/Oceania team will qualify. So that's something that GB has a possibility of doing. They're in qualifiers at the end of this year, and it has been announced who they will be playing. I'm now going to forget because it is in China, but they are facing up. I think I'm going to have to double check this on the pod, which is always the best one. They're playing against China and Czechia and Nicaragua. So that is, once again, that's something that they can potentially do well, qualify. That gets them through to the tournament, and then they have to be basically the best European team and Australia out of those teams, and that would be a possible qualification for the Olympics. If they fail to do that, which is probably more likely, the GB's only route is then via the final qualification tournament, which will have the 2 top teams from the Asian Baseball Championships that haven't qualified, the 2 top teams from the European Championships, the top Oceania team, and the top African team. So effectively, there'll then be a mini tournament between all of those to go through, which, imagining that probably those top Asian teams potentially could include one of like Japan or Korea, or it doesn't potentially, it will include one of Japan or Korea. It's going to be a very difficult tournament to actually like qualify through. So it's out there, but it is a weird kind of thing that we have qualification for the Olympics coming through this wide routes available. But I don't think it's going to really play into the mind of any of the teams that are here right now. It just gives them something an extra thing to kind of like to think about once it's all done and dusted.
Yeah, I imagine they're very much focused on the task at hand at the moment, not thinking about something in 2.5 years' time.
Yeah, there's probably somebody at the back there. I don't know who is the Gary Anderson equivalent for some of these other countries and stuff like that. The delegations, the Marco Materazzi, who is for Italy, who kind of are thinking about these sorts of things so far in ahead. But no, I imagine no one on the USA or Dominican or Venezuelan team is really thinking about that whatsoever.
Yeah, I think they'll probably be focused on just winning at the end of this week. So I think that about covers the action that's happened so far. Obviously, there's lots of great content on the website, batflipsandnerds.com. Both you and Gav have been posting up a storm there, and you've been doing tons on the socials. Is there anything else that you want to pick out? Anything you've got coming up, or anything you just wanted to highlight as a particularly great moment so far that you've enjoyed?
I think I do find there are a couple of things. Obviously, like the moment of like the tournament in Pool A. I was reading some things, and before the game against Italy, it was like, oh, like Kyle Schwarber's monster home run was like the moment of the tournament so far, and I was like, yeah, you beating like GB is not necessarily like what you think like the monster moments are, but I think yeah, I obviously Gav's done when we actually talk about stuff. Gav's written great articles. Gav's been the one who's been tweeting out most of the time, keeping people updated. Where do go look at the site. I think there are a few people who are getting out some of their 5 reasons to be optimistic, because there is still baseball, Major League Baseball coming. That we're going to have to switch our brains very quickly to go back to that too. But it is on the horizon for what should be a very interesting MLB season.
Yeah, it's not long at all. It's only a couple of weeks away, so this is going to finish, and we're very quickly going to have to get these players back to their teams and get ready for the regular season, because it's going to be starting in 2 weeks' time. So all that to look forward to as well. Great stuff. I'm sure we will be back with more after the tournament concludes. Get your recap of the knockout stages. It'll be great to hear, and I think we will have the infamous prediction pod coming up soon as well at some point. Everybody's favorite podcast of the year, or just mine, because I get to update a spreadsheet. So to look out for all of that, and we will catch you next time.